Continue in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You can actually turn over there. I'll kind of reread what we kind of went over last week, but we'll kind of get into really we'll be going through chapter 13, but verses 4 through 8 on this morning. That's be pretty much where we kind of sticking at most of the time. I will say on the onset, don't think this is beat up on David Day. So we'll look at some things in the Bible from 2 Samuel and just kind of have a practical biblical look at love and some of the things that David did, but it's not beat up on David Day. So don't think we're taking our study of having the whole Bible in front of us and just kind of taking punches at David. But 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, as we talked about last week, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Then we get into verse 4, it starts talking about this, some things love is, going into the verbs of what love is and what love is not. It first says love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. So, talking about that, when we say love is patient, if we had to define what patient is, what would one may say? That's one is one of you all. What would you define as patient? Yes, sir.
An old translation for that Greek word is long suffering. And I think it basically is from that is the idea that there are things in this world that are not optimal, and they're not necessarily, there are things in this side of eternity that are not what we would like, but sometimes we have to put up with them anyway. Or there's things that we would like that we don't get. And so it's patience, and sometimes it's patience in the sense of the will of God. In other words, we are doing the will of God, so that's kind of what I'm thinking of.
I think that patience is the backbone of love. It's when you know you've done your best and you can see somebody just making a shipwreck of their lives, and you've done everything you can. You just have to be patient and wait for it to set in and hope that it does.
So I kind of feel like, I'm visiting a hospital. I'm here trying to cheer someone up, and I'm being cheered up. I mean, I don't know if you kind of listen to what Irvine said, but basically he said patience is the backbone of love. And Troy had great comments as well. Patience is long suffering. But, I think when he says the comments, someone making a shipwreck of their life, and you know what I mean, young people we love, people we know, and you're just trying to have that, that Christian patience to bear with the rod, and it's tough. It really is. The great thing about what the Bible says here, it says love is patient, and it doesn't say anything else. It doesn't say that your love is patient only when you're not tired, only when you're happy. Only when things are going really smooth. Only when storms are not brewing and trees are not leaning to the right or left. It has no caveat. It just says love is patient. Now, the definition that I looked up, and of course, these are all, dictionary definitions. It says that patient is forbearing, is long-suffering, is uncomplaining. Uncomplaining. And I don't know about you, but I complained about something this week. I probably complained about something driving here this morning. But, that's what patience is. Able to accept or tolerate delays, problems, or suffering without being annoyed or anxious, And that's very difficult to do. And in particular for instant world we live in, the young people today, they live in a world where they have instant connection to all their friends and all this technology and that. So it makes their upbringing, their vantage point in this life is different than what we had and what we have. And their patience compared to our patience is translated differently. Sure.
I think the word you might be looking for or that might apply is instant gratification. We are so used to instant gratification, and not only the young people. I think that our society has just been moving in that direction that we have, we've been spoiled by so much that we just get used to it and it becomes a sense of entitlement. And so if we don't get that instant gratification, we become impatient. And anyway, yeah.
And that word that I think you're gonna add to that, we become entitled and we get quickly, wanting something to happen like right now. It's like, I think McDonald's came around in the 50s, Ray Kroc, and I think Chick-fil-A, I feel bad because I read like several Chick-fil-A books, but I think it was like the 60s or somewhere around there. But, they had this instant food, you could just swing through a drive-through, and that was kind of the start, Now, you can go to Publix and get an instant meal, just go home and warm it up, It's not, mom or grandma in the kitchen or granddad, dads. Most people don't eat their dad food. That's just barbecue, but I'm not going to talk about that.
It's on the grill.
Yes, it's on the grill. But kind, how would you define kind? So I would say warm-hearted, good-natured. And, we can be kind. Oftentimes, we are kind, particularly in most settings, in public settings. But are we kind when we're in private settings, or are we kind when we're comfortable with someone and maybe we're having as they would say, a real conversation? Are we kind with some of our words and the things that we're saying, And those are, again, this is not, like I said in the beginning, not poke at David. We're going to get over to David pretty shortly here, but these types of things can kind of prick us because when you think about all these things, this is what the Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians church. It's fine to have all that talent and be able to speak in tongues and all that, but without love, that stuff is nothing. But this is what's the definition of love: having these traits, these qualities, kind.
Rolanda.
Yeah.
I think kindness is a qualification for our speech. Sometimes we ask ourselves, well, should I really say that? Well, some of the and it's an old saying, I guess, or cliche, but is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Or is it helpful? Are things that to ask, should I really say that? And being kind, I think, is one of those. Now, someone may say that, well, sometimes you need to have tough love and you need to say something that doesn't necessarily sound kind. But now the test on that is what's the potential for it doing good? Yeah. Sometimes the kind thing may be to be forthright, to be, maybe a rebuke might be necessary or something like that. But then we have to ask ourselves, what is it motivated by? And is the potential there for it to do good? So.
That's a very, very good point. I'll go right here, sir, and I'll go right there. Please go ahead.
I think this is written for us and how we're to treat people, not written for how people treat us.
That's a very good
A
point.
lot of times, I'm really kind to people that are kind to me.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to
if
be
they're kind to me, I may not be that kind to them.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of the direction I was going. It is the response portion of our actions, to be kind. Yes, we want to be accepting to a degree of what people are going through or what they're in the middle of, or what they have done. But the response to that is what that kindness represents. And, at times you want to rebuke, you want to help them, encourage them to transition to a more positive direction. But at most, like Larry was just saying, you want to be nice to people, you want to be kind to them, be loving regardless. That's what's behind it all. Have that compassion. That's what ties
That's
into
so
the
true.
response.
Yes, ma'am.
Basically, it was what the two of them said, but in my way of thinking, sometimes you have to think about it to be kind. And you should always, I try to keep this in my mind, you always should treat and speak to other people the way you would want to be treated or spoken to in that situation.
Yeah, and everything that all of you said is so enlightening. And, I think one thing that this study does for hopefully all of us, it kind of open our mind to just kind of, think about these qualities and put them in the forefront of our mind. And sometimes it's tough to be kind to people who are not kind to you. And it's also tough to, when things happen instantaneously, to remember, I am to be kind. You have to plan to be kind and make a decision to be kind, because something could happen immediately, with your spouse, your kids, in traffic, or whatever that case may be. And you have to be kind of, I think that's why the Bible always says, we got to be ready. We always got to be on guard, because it's not just the big things we could do, but it's the things that we could say, and I think one thing that Troy said that was very encouraging is that comment gonna, bring some uplifting? Is that comment gonna be encouraging? Is that comment, maybe that comment is needed, but maybe it needs to be told at a different time or something like that. We'll keep going. Larry, go ahead.
I was thinking, I got the picture, of Jesus hanging on the cross and them putting him on the cross. He was still kind to them, going through all that pain and agony. If we could just follow something.
That's pretty deep, Larry, because let me see. Most recently, I hurt my elbow. And it still hurts right now. I'm probably not as happy sometimes, because when you feel pain, when you're in pain, it's just like, it talks about in 1 Corinthians, each of us are part of the body. If something's wrong with Larry, then something should be wrong with all of us. It's just like if something's wrong with your foot, then something's going to be wrong with your whole body. It's not like, well, I don't need my foot. I don't need my elbow. We need everything, our eyes. You can survive without certain things. But the point I'm making is, what Larry is saying is, when Jesus was on that cross, I cannot imagine the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical pain that he was enduring. But he told that man, I will remember you. And I probably, wouldn't be saying that. I'd probably be like, get lost, buddy. You're on your own. I'm over here with these nails in my hand. This is, unbearable,
Yeah, what Larry was saying earlier about being kind to those who are kind to you, I'm reminded of what Jesus said. He said, if you love only those who love you, how much better are you than the pagans? They do that,
That's so true. Well, we're going to keep going here. Go ahead, please.
There's a thing, an occasion in my life that just stands out when we're talking about something like this, love and patience and kindness. In high school, I was very, very fortunate to have the same teacher for English in the 11th and 12th grades. And we had a young man who was just the superstar. He was everything. He was intelligent, athletic, and in class one day, he made a remark that was really smart aleck. And Miss Betterton stopped and she walked back to his desk. And she looked at him and she could have berated him for being a smart aleck. But she looked at him and she said, "Oh, Ronnie, you're so much better than that." And went back and continued teaching.
Wow.
I'm sure he remembers it because I remember it. And that was in 1953.
Yeah, that could have went so many different ways.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. So it says that love, it does not envy. Envy is a desire, resentment, jealousy, a feeling of discontent or resentment longing aroused by someone else's possessions or qualities. Love does not boast, mean show off, brag, gloat, talk excessively, pride, self-satisfaction about one's achievement, possessions, or ability. It is not proud, conceited, full of oneself, vain. It does not dishonor. I mean, it does not bring shame, does not humiliate, does not disgrace. Self-seeking, meaning self-absorbed. Having concern for one's own welfare and interests before those of others, self-serving. Also talks about love protects, meaning safeguards, shields, preserves, keeps safe from harm or injury. And it could be spiritual injury, emotional injury. Love protects. It talks about love never fails, meaning never lets down, never disappoints, never fades. So as we talk about all of that, let us turn over to 2 Samuel chapter 11. And I'm sure you all know David, and from a very humble beginning with his many brothers, he was one of the brothers that pretty much came up as one of the younger ones that was not really very recognized, not very outgoing as other ones, kind of smaller in stature and things of that nature. But David had many blessings that God bestowed on him. And one of those was to become the king of Israel, king of Judah. And to have all these possessions. I mean, David is known for being a man after God's own heart. So in 2 Samuel chapter 11, we know there's a story called, they go into David and Bathsheba. I mean, they had many wives, kingdom, all these things, but yet he kind of drifts away from God during this period of time. And, he's self-serving, envious, dishonoring, all these things that we talk about what love is not. This is what the man after God's own heart did. So, I think about David sometime, and if you ever have any thoughts of yourself, of measuring yourself, and sometimes we Christians, we analyze ourselves and we say we may sometimes feel that we may not be living up to the cut potentially, or maybe it's just me. But the point is, you think about David and all that he did, and God still forgave him in the end. And he was a man after God's own heart. And you think about what he did, it really was not aligned to what 1 Corinthians 13 is written out as. We'll go through several of these scriptures, but I just want to kind of really point it out. So in 2 Samuel 11, verse 1, it says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. So I remember earlier reading that one of the reasons why David had remained in Jerusalem, because one, he wanted to kind of recover, but two, he kind of just sat this one out and sent Joab. From the reading, him and Joab were very, very close. It's like his general. They had been through a lot together, so he very trustworthy. But he legitimately set this out, which that's his right. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. So that's his vantage point. That's, where he lives. He hasn't done anything at this point wrong. He walks around. He has many wives and all this. David sent someone to find out about her. That's within his rights. The man says she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. And David sent a messenger to get her. So now he finds out that Bathsheba is one of the men of valor, Uriah the Hittite's wife. He saw her. He thinks she's physically attractive. The Bible says she was. And then he asks about her, but now he sends a messenger to send for her. And I'm pretty sure, obviously as the story goes along, it's not to just say, hey, how you doing without your husband and Bill and all this stuff. But so when you think about, love is kind, so David's not being kind right now. He's not protecting. It's a man forefront that's at war for his country. And, because of David's current state of, I don't want to use the word bored, but kind of being mischievous. He's doing something he shouldn't be doing. Troy?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of point to the other side of a coin here. You said up to this point, he hadn't done anything wrong. I don't know about that, because they say that the idle mind is the devil's workshop. And I think he had an idle mind right here.
He has a very idle mind.
I think that was the case. And I think that he, when he, looked over there, I get the idea he didn't just look over and look away.
Well, I would have.
Otherwise he might not have done what he did. And it's so, yeah, technically, I suppose the actions, but see, I think this sin started in his heart long before it started long before it became an action. And
I think at the point when he realized that she was someone's wife, whatever he thought should have ended there, but he takes that step and he sends the messenger for her. And that's what's just so amazing about this, because, all the things that David had been through and all the things that God had did for him. And I think it's, as we continue reading this, you kind of see where anyone can fall into Satan's trap. And we can all be blinded by just going along and doing wrong. And until you tapped or woke up or whatever the case may be. And the traps are out there. There's a Roman lion seeking whomever he can devour. Right. And it can start with, some of those small qualities of what we're talking about, which are big things, really, really big. Yes, sir.
That is just, I'm reminded of one of the sayings that I heard a long time ago, and it's absolutely true, is that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you're thinking about the shepherd boy David, who slew the lion and was so brave. He was the giant killer. He knew that he could go against this giant because God was his father. And God was going to protect him. But when he got in a position of power, he started to believe it himself. And that's something that we all need to guard against. When you think you stand, look out, you're about to fall. And that's just amazing. And it's like, if I had grand dreams for my son, I would never want him to be president of the United States. It was, that's a terrible battle, to keep all that in balance, to have that power, to have that be set up like that and not begin to believe it yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It'll go to your head.
So true. So what Irvin said was, power can basically corrupt any individual. That's so true. So have you ever heard of the Bathsheba syndrome? Anyone ever heard of a study called the Bathsheba syndrome?
Heard of that.
Okay. Well, so the Bathsheba syndrome is a research study that Management Intellect did. And basically they take a look at corporate leaders, military leaders, all these leaders. But you know what they did? They went to the Bible and they looked at David as this study. And they looked at how, leaders who have access to all kind of privilege, power, resources, armies, riches, all these things, who normally come from humble beginnings, they can fall to corruption because they have so much, power. Plato said the ultimate measure of a man is what he does with power. Said long ago in BC. We got what year, like 493 BC, something like that. But the thing about this is, David had all this. So I think as Troy kind of articulated, he was kind of, bored. He had some time on his hands and wasn't at battle like he could have been, or whatever the case may be. And he started to walk around and get himself into things that he didn't have to. And of course, as we'll continue reading here, but in 2 Samuel 11, this whole chapter kind of just talks about David's deception. And being who David was, as you read this, you would kind of think, well, he's going to wake up. He's going to wake up. No, he just keeps making it's like once you make
You're in the hole.
sin, he just keeps making a sin after sin after sin to cover up for what he did. But it's beautiful to see what happens in the end. He as it says, love never fails. David loved God. He truly did. And he was caught up in some web of destruction and deception, and he needed someone to help wake him up. But we'll continue on reading some, and I'll paraphrase some of this, but I want to try to get through this as much as we can. And David sent a messenger for her in verse 4. She came to him and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. But David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite, and Joab sent him to David. Uriah came to him. David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. So David sends for Uriah, and he's making this small talk. And he's really not concerned with any of that. This is just his deception, his ploy to, as we go in these verses, to get Uriah to go to his house. He's been in a military war campaign, all this and that. So his goal is to get Uriah to go home and, be with his wife so that, her pregnancy would be believed to be his child. So in verse 10, David was told Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and Judah are staying in tents. And my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go home, out to my home to eat and drink and make love to my wife, as surely you live, I will not do such a thing. So you think about this, the characteristics of love and what Uriah is saying here. Uriah is being more patient,
Righteous.
more hopeful, persevering than anything. So when you look at the two qualities of what's going on here, Uriah is the one who's actually been that person who, if we didn't know anything about the Bible, we would think that Uriah is the man after God's own heart. No, it's David. David's the man who's doing all this. David said to him, stay here one more day, in verse 12, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next day. As David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, even though he was out of his wits, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants, and he did not go home. So regardless of all that, he still decided not to go home. I mean, I just find that really, really amazing, that, he has that much, forbearance, that much not dishonoring his beliefs and what he should be doing as a soldier of the king, because he could have easily, went home and, had a great time.
David was the perfect example of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Uriah was the champion of absolute integrity.
Yes, so well stated. Thank you.
To make it even more stark here, Uriah was known among a group of men called basically David's mighty men.
Men of valor.
Yeah, he was one of the special warrior for David, and who was committed to him and loyal to David.
Yeah.
And it just makes it all the worse, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever watch Game of Thrones. I don't know if you ever watch Game of Thrones, but regardless if you haven't, you know how like the presidents or kings have, they have armies and navies and all that, but then as Troy's saying, they have the kings and the president has like a special force that's just dedicated to them. Uriah was one of the men of valor, of this. I think it was like 100 men or so, and the Bible actually names each one of them. Uriah's in there. But the thing is, you would think that David would probably have a little more compassion towards him because of this. And I think this next verse, as we kind of read it, as I read, kind of going through the study this week and everything, I was kind of really taken back. I had read it before, but, as you read the Bible again, it kind of just refreshes with you. So in verse 14, it says, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. Obviously he took his signet ring and put it on there, so only Joab would be able to open it. In it, he wrote, put Uriah at the front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. So just a few things out of that. So unbeknownst to Uriah, he is actually taking his execution letter back to Joab. He doesn't even know it. Joab, in this day and age, is
Is that
so
the
loyal.
absolute disrespect?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. I mean, Joab, as his beyond loyal servant, is just going to follow this. But, the thing about it, so Joab read it. They were in the fight, they were under siege and, they fell back from Uriah. And, as I first read this, you can read these types of things, and unless you really go in to really study them, you think, okay, well, Uriah died. Well, no, Uriah didn't just die. It was several hundred men with Uriah, because you think about it, it's a battle with thousands of men. So if they withdraw, all those men are not going to, Joab is the only one who knew this. No one else knew this. So when they withdrew, Uriah fell, but the historians say that at least 200 men died with Uriah. So for David to get what he wanted, he had to kill Uriah plus over 100 plus men. You think about that, so when we look at, kindness, I think David kind of liked some kindness there. When you look at envy, I think he was envying greatly because he wanted to not only have Bathsheba, but he wanted to more so conceal the sin that he committed. When you look at boasting, you think about how David, what was it to him to add one more woman to the list of his wives? I mean, imagine if he would have, Uriah came home and he would just been honest. I mean, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know how the Bible would have written it. But if he would have done that, imagine how great of a, story, that is for us to look at examples. So when I said earlier, you think about how we can ever, kind of look at ourselves. If you look at a man after God's own heart, we're probably saints in comparison. I mean, have you plotted someone's murder recently? Have you, fornicated with someone's spouse? Have you lied to get hundreds of people killed? So obviously the time is kind of drawing here, and I really honestly thought I didn't have enough material, but I have more than enough. And we can't continue this next week because I have to get more into Paul and finish the chapter because we're going to get kind of into Apostle Paul next week. And, as I spoke as a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child. We're going to get into that, and we're going to kind of get a little heavy into that. But I do want to kind of paraphrase and finish this up with the remaining time we have, So obviously Uriah dies. Joab sends a messenger to David and says, hey, this is what happened to the men. And Joab is still kind of nervous to tell him that not just Uriah died, but other men died. So he told the messenger, hey, say, when the king says, why did you all get so close to the wall? If his anger starts to flare up, tell him Uriah died. So I was really amazed that, even though Joab knew all about this, he still was nervous. And as the messenger told him, he said that Uriah died. And he said, obviously we live by the sword, we die by the sword. And, unfortunately, things happen. But, he was obviously, happy about this. And I think as we kind of look at this, you can see why there was a study called the Bathsheba syndrome. Because David, as everyone said, he is the perfect example of how power can so easily corrupt among great men. They can be preachers, teachers, elders, deacons, whoever. Any man other than Jesus Christ can be, deceived, can fall. At least you think you're standing, then you're falling. But the point is, that's why we have to be constantly, watching. So David is feeling good, now that Bathsheba has mourned one night, and then in the morning she comes to David, he makes her a wife, she's pregnant, and Nathan comes in Samuel 2, chapter 12, and tells David, and I do apologize, I don't have time to read all that, but tells David about this one man who had one lamb. Love the lamb, treat the lamb, as a child, feed him this and that. And this rich man, he sends a messenger. Rich man has all these lambs and this and that. And he kills the man and takes the lamb, or he wants the lamb, steals the lamb from him. I do apologize. So with that, David is like this. Burning with anger. He says, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. And then Nathan says, you the man, not like you the man, like, hey, you are the man. You know how sometimes the slang word idiom says you the man? Nope. You are the man who did this. So David, the light came on. He realized what he had did. And then Nathan, he goes down the list and tells him everything God had did for him. He said, I even gave you more. Well, what do you do? You sin against me. And the beautiful thing as we wrap this up is it says in 1 Corinthians 3 and 13:1 that love never fails. And when David is told about this, the first thing he says is, I have sinned against God. It's like whatever fog he was in, whatever deception, whatever senses turned down, it all turned off and he realized his sin. And it took the prophet Nathan to come to him to tell him that. And, of course, because of that, the baby who was born died. And after that, him and Bathsheba, they mourned for a period, but then they went to have another child. And, that child was called Jedediah, meaning Samuel. That's Samuel comes from Bathsheba in the lineage of Christ. So out of this great sinful everything, that's the lineage of Christ, what David did. And it's just amazing that, sometimes it takes, people to take that step back and kind of think about, what's going on to try to figure out, where am I going wrong or what am I doing? Someone cuts you off, you honk your horn, someone says something, you say something back. But it's kind of like, the bigger things, strategically, what's the purpose, what's going on? And it's good that the Bible says love never fails, because I think if David would have maybe reacted to this, saw this differently, then maybe, he has drifted possibly too far from God. I don't know, whatever the case may be, but, he realized his wrong, and it took Nathan to kind of, refresh his thoughts on this. And then he realized what he needed to do. He needed to repent. So I hope you've taken something from this. Next week, we'll finish 1 Corinthians 13. I know when we finish next week, I think the study after this will be quality words to live by, I believe, will be in June. So I think that'll be great as well. But I really thank you for your time and your patience, your kind remarks, your long suffering listening to me. Yes, sir.
One great lesson out of this story about David we can take is that it helps us understand why David was so forgiving to his son who was trying to kill him. They kicked him out and was bent on killing. And David issued the order to his generals, don't hurt my son. Because David could see that there I go. He's grown up just like me.
Yeah, that is so true. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rolando.
Great job.